There are over 35,000 museums within the United States, welcoming over 850 million visitors each year. Did you ever wonder what goes on behind the scenes in museums, creating the displays and exhibits we all enjoy? Join us as we explore museums and their exhibits from the inside out. Hi, I'm Leslie Mueller. Welcome to Museum Access, the show that takes you to America's top museums to talk to the experts. Then we go behind the scenes to learn even more. We're minutes away from Manhattan in Astoria, Queens, at the Museum of the Moving Image. It holds the nation's largest collection of artifacts relating to the art, history, and technology of the moving image. 130,000 artifacts from every stage of the creative process in the motion picture, television, and digital media industry. Today we'll explore the museum's core exhibition, Behind the Screen, with over 1,400 artifacts from 19th century toys to 21st century digital technology. This exhibit alone is worth the visit. We'll also learn about the remarkable career and legacy of Jim Henson, his impact on our culture, and the magical worlds he created with Kermit the Frog, Miss Piggy, Big Bird, Elmo, and so many other beloved puppet characters. Then we'll go behind the scenes to see just how these moving images fill the screens of your local theaters. So are you ready to learn more about the creative process behind the moving images we all love? Let's go. What a great collection you've got here.
Well, and there's no other collection like in the world. We have over 100,000 items and objects related to the art, the history, the technology of the moving image, which we define right now as film, television, and digital media.
It's a broad topic, right?
It is, but it's a topic not covered, by other museums, and yet it pervades our lives. It is both a reflection of the world, but it's also a window into the world. And so much of what we think and how we interact and what we do is shaped by the moving image in one way or another. And the Museum of the Moving Image is as much about the future of the moving image as it is about the past. In fact, it's all about connecting the two to lead to a more literate and actually digitally fluent population that understands the role and importance of the moving image in our daily lives.
So let's talk about the location, being in Astoria and morphing into a museum. Tell me a little bit about this.
The Museum of the Moving Image is adjacent to the largest still operating movie studio on the East Coast. It opened in 1920 as the East Coast headquarters of Paramount Pictures. And what they wanted to do was draw from the tremendous talent in New York, especially in the theater. There were many, many buildings. This building where the museum is one of the buildings that was in this very large complex called the Astoria Studios. And so in 1988 we opened much smaller than we are now and really figured out what it meant to be a museum. But it really was in 2008 that we began a major expansion, doubling in size with this beautiful theater and new lobby and gallery spaces. And we opened in our new guise to the public in 2011 and created, I think, this sense of immersion that is as important to the moving image as storytelling is. We actually take pride in being, as a city-owned facility, the people's house. And we have young people who are very conversant in social media platforms and what they call user-generated content at the companies and so on. And then you sit them down in a beautiful, spacious movie theater with a gigantic screen to see The Godfather on its, in its original 35 millimeter celluloid form. And we actually have people who stand up and clap after a movie. The point is we view the screening of films in our theater as almost like performances, with the projectionist, which they are called projectionist, is in a sense the artist. So when people come to the museum, they will see a fabulous core exhibition called Behind the Screen that is devoted to how movies are made and who makes them. We then have what is now one of the most magnetic tourist attractions in New York City, the Jim Henson exhibition. And so that is here for all visitors when they come to the museum, and all sorts of other engaging, interactive activities that people can do together. And if you're not interested in pushing the buttons and touching the screen, it's okay, because you can watch others, including your family, gravitate toward the things that involve interaction, engagement. And if you're lucky enough to be a public school student in New York City or in the area, you'll come here and you can take a class, a workshop where you learn how to make moving images. 12 after-school programs with local schools and growing, which we do virtually now, as well as on-site. Summer media camps. So when young people and over 60,000 school students visit the museum each year for tours and workshops and so on, one thing I tell them immediately is, this is your museum.
So, Barbara, behind the screen, let's talk about this. This is the exhibit that you really want to see here.
Yes, behind the screen is what we call our core exhibition. It's the primary outlet for our permanent collection, and it's kind of our signature, and it's our main sort of teaching tool, right? We see probably 60,000 school kids a year come through here, and our education department uses this exhibition a lot, really to tell the history of the production, promotion, and exhibition of the moving image in all its forms.
Well, I can't imagine the student coming in and thinking that this is how things are shot when they're used to shooting things on their iPhone.
Well, that's the beauty of it. And I think that this kind of idea informs a lot of different things that we do, which is that we're taking this subject matter that is in everybody's everyday life. Mm-hmm. The moving image sort of is a part of everything that we all do. You can't wall yourself away from it.
Well, let's talk about, I saw Edward Muybridge, and anybody that took photography classes, they start with him. Let's talk about his impact on the moving image.
One of the first experiences you have is seeing these Muybridge photographs where, a succession of images are taken to be able to depict movement in a series of images, which is really the idea behind the moving image. And the idea behind that is a spirit of inquiry, right? Like what does it sort of take to create this illusion of motion? What do we know more about human and animal locomotion, right? Which is what Muybridge is interested in than we did before. What kind of things can we discover through the moving image? And in a way, it's that question that you can apply to any number of things that we show here.
Absolutely. Well, and I also thought it was interesting. Let's talk about the set design. I mean, and the miniatures that are there. How is that useful in the process? Obviously, it's at the beginning of the process, I would think.
Yeah, so Behind the Screen is organized in this way where we really take you through lots of different aspects of, creating and showing and promoting the moving image, whether it's a television program or a film or a video game. So there's sections on makeup, there's sections on set design, there's sections on writing, and of course on the various forms of technology that are applied. So we're standing in front of the cameras right now.
These are beautiful. They're almost like pieces of sculpture, aren't they?
And every section, in a sense, is its own little mini history, right? There's things that you can learn about the historical period in which the specific things that you're looking at were created. So each thing has its own context. Each element, whether it's a camera or whether it's a set model or a series of production design sketches, were made by a person, right? Working in a team, working collaboratively to put something together. And even though Behind the Screen is organized in this way that is modular, that takes on every craft in a sense, on its own, the idea that really animates this core exhibition is that all of these things work in concert together. So one of the real hallmarks of Behind the Screen, especially when it debuted, and now it's almost 30 years, was that we mixed this experience of looking at original artifacts, of having kind of commissioned site-specific artworks, and also a lot of interactive experiences that are sort of your way into trying your own hand at some of the things that the people are doing behind the scenes. Another really fun hands-on thing that people can do here, and a lot of visitors come to us specifically because of this, because video games, the history of video games is part of our mission and part of our story. So we have these amazing arcade games from, the 70s, the 80s, that people can play while they're here. So that is a unique part of our collection. They are things that people can actually touch and interact with.
And it also seems as though, you're very active in sharing your artifacts. Traveling exhibits, do you get involved with that?
We do. Historically, we've always done some traveling exhibitions that have gone to museums around the country, around the world. Right now, we have our Jim Henson exhibition traveling around the country, which is fantastic to be able to kind of like share the love and share the story.
Absolutely, and such a popular topic.
It is.
Yeah.
It's great, and the host museums that have had it, it's really fun to collaborate with them, and it's also just been great for them because they've been able to attract so many visitors because everybody wants to see the Muppets.
Oh, I bet they do.
Yeah.
Being a projectionist is not just a job, it's an art form. It's about knowing the films and equipment, but also knowing how to capture the essence of the film as the director intended. The 9 reels of film arrive in metal canisters. The next step is organizing the multiple reels for sequential viewing. To load the reel, the projectionist threads the film through the projector in a maze that would confuse most of us. And the reels begin to spin and whirl. Finally, looking out his small window, he checks to be sure the image is clear with no distortion. As the audience enjoys the film, they have no idea what's happening just above their heads. So tell us where we are now.
We are at the entrance to the Jim Henson exhibition at MoMI.
This is beautiful, though. And was this here when the museum opened, or is this a more recent exhibition?
No, actually, this exhibition was conceived sort of shortly after we opened our expanded facility in 2011. We were lucky enough to receive a very, very generous and wide-ranging gift from the family of Jim Henson in 2013. And along with that gift came the promise that we would find a space within the museum to create an ongoing exhibition that explored Henson's work and his career and that of his collaborators and really celebrate his legacy.
Well, it's great for the family and it's great for the museum, but let's go back a little bit. He was involved in the arts when he was in his teens? This is a lifelong passion, right?
For Jim Henson, it was never completely about puppetry. Puppetry was a methodology. It was something that he loved and was committed to. And of course, he was a pioneer in that field. But I don't think he ever, first and foremost, thought of himself as a puppeteer. He was a visual storyteller. He was a filmmaker. He was an experimenter and innovator. And the entry experience that we created for this exhibition was meant to really, really capture that, right? All of the different kinds of creative outlets and the different types of approaches that he took in his creative career. So there's, of course, there's Muppets on here, there's things from Sesame Street, but there's also excerpts from his experimental films, and all of those stories are in this exhibition. We really wanted to paint a full picture of Jim and his creative collaborators as a visual artist, as a creative figure.
So let's talk about his collaborators. Obviously, his wife was a collaborator. I'm sure she was a major collaborator.
Yeah.
Then did they have a team that they generally worked with? Same folks, or?
They did. They had a team that was very, very small at first. And when you look at the output of what they were doing, even in the mid-1950s, hundreds of television commercials. And this is after their twice daily 5-minute live shows, Sam and Friends, which was their first show. Then they started making television commercials and sort of industrial films, and started creating pilots for TV shows. But it was really, up until really until Sesame Street started in the late 1960s, did they really expand to some scale. But before then, it was really just a handful of people that he was working with, and incredibly loyal, incredibly long-lasting relationships. I mean, that lasted decades and decades. And you started your career with Henson, and that's where you stayed.
So let's enter Sesame Street, and the brand explodes. What's the next step for Jim Henson at that point?
Well, it's interesting, and it's an interesting question the way you ask it that way. I mean, what it meant, in a sense, was that his path that he had been on from the mid-ish 60s up until about 1968, when he started working on Sesame Street, the path he was on was leaving puppets behind to some degree, and really developing more and spending more time as an experimental filmmaker, and as a filmmaker proper. So he created a short film in 1965 called Timepiece that was nominated for an Oscar. It was his first film.
Was it animated, or?
It had animated aspects of it, but there were no puppets. It was a montage, very, interesting, this sort of existential wrestling with the idea of time and what it all means, and all these big questions.
Wow.
And sort of on from there, so various projects on from there. And then when Sesame Street presented itself as an opportunity, he was very reluctant, because he did not want to become tagged as a children's entertainer, a children's performer. And he saw that in the US, puppetry was sort of indelibly connected with children's entertainment, even though in the rest of the world, it is not, right? In the US, that is very true. His explorations into sort of world puppetry showed him that it doesn't have to be that way, and that he never saw puppetry as something that was just for kids. But he knew that it was likely, if he sort of went into that business, especially for children's programming.
Sure, that could have been very lucrative, and that would have been it.
Right, that could have been the brush he was painted with, and that would have been that.
So I know we're at the beginning of the exhibit here, but you've got a great group of puppets here. Tell us about those.
Yeah, so the puppets over here are, it's actually unusual, because there's puppets here that are from a variety of different production and different story worlds. So there's puppets behind me that are from The Muppet Show and Sesame Street and The Dark Crystal. Typically those, we go through those stories like one by one. But this is kind of the first thing that people see when they walk into the exhibition, in addition to seeing Kermit. And we really wanted them to get a sense of that the puppets really are this company, in a sense, that they are this group of characters that are kind of weird, like they're like
eccentric.
Exactly. That there's a real unusual quality to them, and that they really look different from each other. And there's a wide sort of range. So there's ones that look a little bit more like people, and there's ones that look like nothing that you could ever make up in your head. And,
yes.
And then there they are. So
well, you get the different personalities, but some are more prim and proper, and others look a little more disheveled. So
exactly.
you're dying for them to talk. you want to have a conversation with them.
Exactly, exactly. And that's sort of like where we go in the rest of the exhibition, is like how they were brought to life. You know, the work of the puppeteers, the work of the writers, sort of Jim's work in orchestrating all of it and keeping it together and directing the work of everybody. The puppets are important, but the puppets themselves as physical manifestations are really just one part, was one ingredient, right?
Yes.
Because the puppeteers obviously are the things that bring them to life, and the writers are the ones that kind of give them the stories that they tell.
So are they starting with the story, or did they start with the character? I mean, would you start saying we need a story, so we start envisioning what a character might look like?
You know, it's a really good question, kind of what the genesis of a given, you know, story or program is. I think that when it began, it was really, it kind of was driven by story more than character, because the puppets themselves were initially conceived as just use it for whatever you need to use it for. You put a wig on Kermit, he was a little girl. No, really, in the 50s, he wasn't Kermit the Frog yet. But as the puppets became more and more popular, and they sort of had these characteristics that then, you know, they couldn't shake.
Yeah.
Then the characters themselves yielded different stories. So I think it kind of went either way, in a sense.
Yeah. And so now the puppets themselves, I'm sure the way they are created might indicate how they are used. I mean, obviously there always has to be a human. So now these puppets are in settings. There had to have been some awkward positions that people would have to be in just to make these things work.
Yeah, you should talk to some puppeteers.
Yeah.
Then they
And
keep their
yeah.
chiropractors very busy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, their hands are up like this very often, or out like that. And when you need a second person to perform with you, you're getting into all these crazy configurations. And actually most of the sets, well, when they had enough money to actually begin to be able to build real sets for the puppets, they would build sort of false floors. So the puppeteers would be underneath and, you know, having their arms through, and the puppets would look like they were kind of like on the floor level in a sense. But there were a lot of crazy mechanics that they had to deal with. And there's pictures throughout the exhibition of the puppeteers sort of behind the scenes and the kind of contortions that they had to get into.
Imagine.
Sort of right in front of us is a photo from a television commercial shoot of Jim Henson laying down on a railroad track, you know, with his hands up in a character called the Southern Colonel. So.
That's why they paid him the big bucks.
Yeah, exactly. Eventually.
I doubt he was thinking that at the time.
Yeah.
But I also think that puppeteer has to be aware of the puppets up here. They have to be aware of where the camera is. So they're really having to think in terms of.
Yeah. Well, one of the really key things when you're performing puppetry for television, and again, that's our subject matter, right?
Yeah.
We're not a puppetry museum like the Center for Puppetry Arts in Atlanta that has a big Henson collection. We're a museum of the moving image. So we're always thinking about sort of the relationship between these stories and characters to the mediums, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's television or, you know, film or, you know, wherever it was appearing. So the key performing element was that all of the puppeteers had a monitor that they could look in, and very often that monitor was tiny, but that was their vision of the world. So they would be puppeteering and then peering into a monitor and controlling their movements that way. And what's really cool in our Sesame Street section, we have a Big Bird, which is amazing.
Wow.
And of course, the Big Bird is incredible to have, but what's also incredible, you know, for me and for our visitors to see is that right next to it, there's a harness that Carol Spinney, who performed Big Bird for 50 years, would wear inside the bird. And that harness had a monitor, a tiny little monitor on it. So, because he couldn't see out of the bird, he would be looking down at this monitor while reading a script that was taped to the belly of the bird inside the puppet, while at the same time performing. So there were, you know, incredible technical
Yes.
challenges. And then as the years went on, and Jim's sort of, you know, restless creativity and
reared its head,
and just always striving to find new tools for storytelling, and he was deeply interested in the ways that technology could afford different approaches to storytelling. the technology became even more advanced and complex. So he and his team conceived of remote, like radio-controlled puppetry at first, and then digital-controlled puppetry, so that there didn't always have to be a person physically manipulating the puppet. You could manipulate the puppet from a distance through these controllers that they devised themselves.
You know, even as a child, I wondered how Big Bird was seeing what he was doing. Now, after all these years, you've answered it. He had that little monitor on the inside.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to sneak through a little bit more of the exhibition. Do you mind?
Yes, let's go see it.
Okay, right. Motion pictures, television, and the digital media industry have sure come a long way. They're a central part of many of our lives and a powerful form of creative expression. These images help connect diverse communities on an international level. The Museum of the Moving Images collection is one of the most important collections of its kind in the world. No wonder the London Times cited it as one of the world's top 50 museums. Thanks for joining us on Museum Access, where every visit is an adventure. I'm Leslie Mueller. See you next time.